Welcome, and thank you for reviewing this recorded presentation on the application process for the Childcare Capital Program. My name is Chastity Ponce. I am the Assistant Bureau Director of the Supply and Workforce Team at OCFS. And with me, I have Ann Shaw from DASNY.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ann Shaw, one of the Assistant Directors of the Dormitory Authority Grant Administration Unit, and I am pleased to be part of this and to hopefully give you clarification and tips and tricks for successful application to this exciting new program. Thank you for attending our webinar.
Thank you, Annie. Before we begin, we'd like to remind everyone listening that the Childcare Capital Program is highly competitive, and it's anticipated that the full allotment of funds will be awarded during this application cycle. The total number of awards will depend upon the number of applications received, as well as the score awarded to each application based on responsiveness to the criteria set forth in the request for applications, otherwise known as the RFA. Therefore, it'll be important to note that in addition to attending this webinar, applicants should review the RFA in great detail, as well as the frequently asked questions, otherwise known as the FAQs, prior to applying. Next slide, please. Okay. So a brief outline of the topics that'll be addressed today include the summary of the questions we've received thus far via the SurveyMonkey, the CCCP, which is the name for the Child Care Capital Program, overview, the review of the request for applications, the guidelines for submitting a complete application, prerequisites to the Grant Disbursement Agreement, otherwise known as the GDA, and the CCCP timeline. Next slide, please.
First, we're going to start with reviewing the questions we've already received through the SurveyMonkey. Thank you to everyone who has submitted a question. The number of questions is not bad, and you can see by the graph on the slide that the vast majority of the questions we received thus far relate to eligible projects. So we're going to do our best in this webinar to highlight eligibility of both programs as well as projects to help clarify that for you. So far, we've received a total of 65 questions from 47 individuals, and all of the answers to the SurveyMonkey questions that we receive through the end of the question and answer period will be posted on the OCFS website, the DASNY website, and as part of the grant funding opportunity in the Gateway Grants Management System. That posting will occur at the very latest on February 29th, but it could come up earlier, so keep your eyes peeled. If you still have questions after this webinar, don't worry, the question and answer period does not expire until close of business on the 31st of January. Feel free to go back to the SurveyMonkey and submit additional questions. If by any reason SurveyMonkey gives you the message that you've already submitted a question and it won't let you do it, close out of the browser and go back to SurveyMonkey on another device, your phone, your tablet, your laptop, another desktop, and it'll recognize a different IP address and will allow you to submit up to another 10 questions to the SurveyMonkey. So you should be able to ask as many as you need to ask. Next slide, please.
Okay, we're going to go into the program overview. And for this, the Child Care Capital Program was created to provide capital funding to child care programs that are creating and expanding or expanding the capacity of their programs. So there's $50 million available in funding that'll be awarded through this RFA, and the CCCP will provide reimbursement for grants for the design, construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, equipment, and other capital assets for existing or proposed not-for-profit or for-profit child daycare centers that are licensed pursuant to 18 New York Code Rules and Regulations 418-1, school-age childcare programs registered pursuant to Regulation 414 and Article 47 permitted programs. Next slide, please. Okay, and the funding opportunity is posted on the Grants Gateway as well as OCFS and DASNY websites. And here you'll find the links within this slide. And when searching for the funding opportunity in Grants Gateway, potential applicants should go to the Grant Opportunity portal, click Search for Opportunities, and then search by grant opportunity. Searching for a keyword such as childcare should bring up this opportunity posting. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Okay, so for this, we have the applicant webinar is for informational purposes only. It's provided and intended to just have general guidance with respect to the application process and the CCCP program, and should not be construed as final approval or disapproval of any particular project or project cost. Potential applicants must read the RFA to determine if the project is eligible for funding and if it meets the requirements set forth in the enabling CCCP statute and the RFA. Often the determination as to eligibility is fact specific and is made on a case-by-case basis. So applicants are encouraged to provide a robust description of the project that'll be funded by the CCCP grant, as well as how the project is consistent with the CCCP enabling legislation and the RFA within your application. Okay, next slide. Thank you. All right, so we're going to go over the request for applications, including the key points, the eligibility, the pass-fail eligibility, scoring criteria, and the childcare deserts map. Okay. So this grant is highly competitive. Applications are going to be scored based on project viability, project impact, project need, and they must be shovel ready. The projects must be completed on or before December 31st, 2027. The awards will range between $500,000 and $1.5 million. Qualified applicants must comply with and complete all reviews within 12 months, and no project or location changes will be allowed. Next. Okay. So for eligible entities, those are proposed or existing child daycare centers that are licensed pursuant to 18 New York Code Rules and Regulations 418-1, school-age child care programs registered pursuant to Regulation 414 and Article 47 permitted programs. All applicants need to be either pre-qualified, which are the not-for-profits, or the registered, the for-profit entities for funding through New York State Grants Gateway. All applicants must have site control at the time of the application. The projects must have construction feasibility, and all applicants must be willing to accept families in receipt of child care assistance. All existing child care programs applying must be in good standing, as defined as a licensed child care program in payable status that is not the subject of certain enforcement actions by OCFS or the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Next slide.
Now, for eligible project locations, this was one of the areas that came through with a lot of questions with the eligibility in our SurveyMonkey. One project location is allowed per application. One application and that one project location can cover a single purpose at the site or a multi-purpose project at a single site. But what is not allowed are multiple projects at multiple sites. For example, an applicant can submit one application for infrastructure issues at a single site. For example, replacement of windows, installing a new roof, creating an accessible entryway, and restoring a bathroom or expanding a bathroom. However, the application cannot be submitted to install new windows at site A, replace a bathroom fixtures at site B, and something else at site C. all organizations can only submit one application with one project location per application. If more than one application is submitted by an organization, only the first application received will be reviewed and scored. Please remember that. I know a lot of folks seem to be part and parcel to multiple location in their organization. So you just want to make sure if you're going to submit them, you want one application and one project location. Site control is one of the biggest issues we have with your eligibility. Organizations have to have the authorization to do the project where they're located. And that is very simply, do you own it? If you own it, please provide a copy of the deed with your application. If you lease your site, we need to see that your lease is in your name with the landlord. If there's a sublease, that's okay too. We have to be able to see the landlord, the lessee, and the sublease if necessary. All of the leases must extend at least 8 years from the date of your application. A lease term will be verified as we process awardees through the GDA stage to ensure a significant enough time remains on the lease to ensure you can meet all of the requirements on the RFA. Additionally, if the condition of your lease is that any capital improvement to your leased facility must have your landlord approval, then you need to include with your application a landlord approval letter. It should be on the landlord or real property manager's letterhead and should be attached just like your other documentation right to your application. Again, this will also be reviewed and verified prior to a grant disbursement agreement. Two more important notes before we move on to the other slide. Any project location that has been or will be funded through a tax credit structure is ineligible per the terms of the RFA as well as state finance and U.S. Treasury law. Additionally, any facility that is owned by a religious entity, whether or not the child care provider is a religious entity, is not eligible for capital improvements with state funding. Please refer to Section 2.3 of the RFA for any additional information on eligibility for the project locations. Next slide, please.
Okay, so in slide 11, we talked about eligible entities, and here we're going to talk about the ineligible entities. Small daycare centers are ineligible. They're not able to apply for this funding. And childcare programs with the following statuses through OCFS or DOH-MH are ineligible to apply to receive this funding, and those include OCFS enforcement statuses of suspension of license, limitation of license, suspension and proposed revocation of license, proposed revocation of license, denial of application to renew, license ineligible. And then the DOH enforcement statuses include permit revoked, permit suspended, out of business. Additionally, childcare programs applying for funds for construction or renovation projects located in a facility owned by a religious organization are not eligible for the childcare capital program funding. Next slide, please.
Now we'd like to talk about eligible projects and costs that are eligible for funding through CCCP. All projects to be eligible have to meet the following criteria. It must be an eligible construction project with a minimum project cost of $500,000. The project cannot have started and costs cannot be incurred prior to April 1st, 2023. The project must be completed and all payment requisitions processed and paid to the organization by December 31st, 2027. This is not the fastest program the state has ever done, but this is not a long-term 10-year capital projection project. We are looking to get the childcare slots available to families across the state sooner rather than later. So you can't have started your project prior to April 1st, 2023, and you must finish it by December 31st, 2027. Additionally, all proposed programs must be licensed to operate a daycare facility within 6 months of the completion of the construction project, which we are defining in the RFA was when the certificate of occupancy is issued to the organization. Next slide, please. Examples of eligible and ineligible costs for capital projects. They include new construction or converting or adapting other spaces to create additional classroom space, creation or improvement of areas for indoor, outdoor gross motor and multipurpose spaces, improving the egress and access, whether interior or exterior, for children with limited or no mobility, creation of age or height appropriate bathroom facilities, and or indoor classroom hand washing sinks and changing areas. Health and safety renovations include things like security provisions, whether they be at the entrance, exterior, interior, fire protection, nurse stations, sick child areas, and kitchen and food preparation areas. Doors, windows, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, roofing, fencing, sidewalks, and parking areas. And additionally, architectural design and engineering are eligible project costs. All bondable costs is what we're looking for because the CCCP program is funded with bonds issued by the state of New York. So every cost that we can reimburse has to be eligible to receive that funding. That's why it's mission critical for these costs to be these costs. Ineligible costs, which are non-eligible for CCP funding or bond funding according to state finance and treasury rules, actually, real property acquisition could be considered a capital eligible cost, but is not the goal of this program. So therefore, it is an ineligible cost under this program. Ineligible as well is working capital, including your operating expenses, your salary, your rent, your utilities, toys, supplies, and curriculum. Your grant writing and administration, legal, insurance, and other fees, repairs and maintenance, long-term debt, including the financing of machinery or equipment. And again, as we mentioned before, any project that is part of an existing or proposed tax credit structure is not eligible for child care capital funding. Next slide, please. Your eligible project budget. These are the things we want you to focus on in the coming weeks and months leading up to the application submission deadline. Applicants are advised that grants are awarded to applicants that can demonstrate their project is fully funded and can be completed with the grant funds and any other funding they may need as necessary for the project. When you do your budget and you attach your things, we're looking at cost justification, and it's outlined in section 2.5 of the RFA. Applicants must provide cost estimates prepared by a design or construction professional, as well as a narrative that explains how the applicant arrived at the cost estimates. We want to see what you're doing. Are you adding classroom space? Are you renovating your bathrooms? Are you doing those gross motor projects we talked about in previous slides? Your cost estimates from your design professional, your construction manager, or individual contractors or vendors will show that to us. There'll be so many doors in this space, so many sinks, so many toilets, so many changing stations. They'll all be outlined in your cost estimate. If an estimate of cost of the project exceed the amount of the grant, you're asking for $1 million, your project is $3 million, for example, the applicant must provide evidence that they have sufficient committed funding necessary to complete the project as described. If the project includes costs that are ineligible for reimbursement, maybe your project is only $600,000, but $70,000 of those dollars would be those ineligible costs. There might be grant management, they might be fees, they might be maintenance. We need to see where the ineligible costs are funded from. Again, we need to see how your project's funded. When you put your application in, it should be soup to nuts. How much will it cost? These are the cost estimates. How will it be funded? I'm asking for this much in CCCP grant funding, and I'll need these additional resources to complete my project. We cannot award a project for half a construction project. It has to be an entire project in one fell swoop. At least one qualified estimate dated no earlier than October 1st, 2023 for each project task should be submitted with your application. All of those project estimates can be on one estimate. If you have 17 different tasks as part of your project, you don't need 17 different estimates. You just need one. If you have a contract manager or a design consultant that is doing your estimation, they can estimate the entire project from start to finish on one estimate. Additionally, you can submit different ones. Maybe you have someone looking only at the electrical portion of your budget and they submit an estimate for that. Someone else is doing the plumbing. Someone else is doing the brick and mortar construction. Those are fine too. It's entirely your call, whatever is easiest for your organization, as long as we get the full complete picture with your application. Examples of sufficient documentation to show evidence of committed funding resources include potentially your recently audited financial statement. It might be your bank account or investment account statement. It may be additional grant award letters you have from other funding sources, be they state of New York, federal, local, county, or private foundations. And agreements or contracts that you might already have if you've secured the other funding. Additional examples of acceptable documentation are outlined in the RFA as well as in the actual application. All applications will be scored on this financial information that you provide with your application. Should the project be awarded a grant, DASNY will undertake a full financial review of the project once the award's been made and the application has been forwarded to us for processing. Next slide, please. Once your application is received with us, after the submission date, so everything is through till May 21st, so starting, on the 22nd, we'll start looking at applications. The very first thing that we will do is we will review these applications on a pass-fail eligibility. We won't necessarily be looking at the number of childcare slots and the need and impact. At this point, we're first going to see, is this eligible for scoring? We will be looking at the status in the Grants Gateway grants management system to see if your organization, if you're a not-for-profit, are you pre-qualified? If you're a for-profit entity, have you registered with the grants management system? Before your application, your organization has to be in the grants management system when you apply. So we'll go over that in a little bit more detail later, but that at the time of application, you must be in this system. Then we'll look to see if the applicant is eligible as defined as Section 2.1 and 2.2 of the RFA. We'll look to see if the location eligibility meets the definitions defined by the RFA. We'll look at those project cost eligibility that we just talked about. And we'll look at the funding eligibility for any funds you might need to complete your project over and above the grant you are requesting. Remember, when we are talking about the information from the Grants Gateway or Grants Management System, the folks that are doing this pass-fail eligibility review will have access to this system. So we do not mean that you have to go back into your document vault in Grants Management and re-pull all of that information you have provided to them. We have access to that. We will verify its existence for all of the organizations. Next slide, please. After you pass the pass-fail eligibility, all of the applications will be scored. The scoring criteria that is important to us, there's 3 categories. The first one is project viability, the second is project impact, and the third is project need. DASNY team will review the project viability based on the project description, the budget, and supporting financial documentation submitted with the application, so we can substantiate the project's total cost and the project's total funding. Again, we'll be looking at recent estimates, invoices. You may have started the project, say last August, and you already have incurred costs. You don't need estimates for those. You can provide your invoices. And remember, all of these invoices and estimates need to come from businesses authorized to do business in New York State as outlined in the RFA, and they should all be in your legal name. It's very critical that the organization that is applying is the one that's actually undertaking the project. Your recent bank statements, again, in your legal name, as evidence in the funds committed to support your project over and above the excess of the grant award. All statements should be no earlier than September 30th, 2023. If by any chance you know your project already needed a seeker or a state historic preservation office input and you have that, you can provide that as well. If it's not needed or unknown at the time, we'll go over that under the DASNY reviews. After DASNY has completed the project viability reviews, the team at Office of Children and Family Services will review based on project impact and project need, based on the project narrative you have provided with your application, as well as the backup documentation you gave in your application in Section 5 and Section 6 of the application. Remember, the CCP application and scoring matrix are already posted and available. They're in all 3 posting locations we identified earlier in this presentation. You'll find them in the DASNY website, the OCFS Childcare website, and you'll find them in the grant opportunity in the grants management system. Please, please, please be certain to thoroughly review not only the RFA, but the application and the scoring metrics so you can see exactly what we will be looking at when we do the eligibility review and the scoring criteria for all of these 3 critical components of your application. What we're looking for, we've already identified. You just need to make sure that you read it and understand it. Next slide, please.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the deserts map tool. When you're doing your application and they're going to ask for the desert map scoring piece of it. This is where the desert map shows all census tracts in the state, the level of shortage of childcare slots. So when you're looking at the map, you'll see that there's darker shaded areas, lighter areas. Just know that the darker the area, the more of a shortage of childcare that area has. And more than 60% of the state is considered a childcare desert. Applicants are not required to be located in a childcare desert to be eligible for the CCCP grant. Based on your location, once you put your address in there, right? So if you know where your childcare program will be located, you enter the address into the map tool, and then on the left-hand panel there, and then it'll zoom into the address and the map will display more details, right? So let's say you don't know where your childcare program is located. You can actually browse by clicking on the map. You can zoom in, zoom out using the plus and minus buttons, click the surrounding census tracts to see the calculated desert levels, and you can click on the red pin to view more information depending on the areas that you're searching. Please know, based on your location, you'll receive a number that will fall within low, medium, or a high range. This number will then reflect the answers to questions 4 and 5 of the project needs section of the scoring matrix. And you'll receive the designated points value on your application. Next slide, please. So this is what the map looks like. When you go to this site, when you want to view the regional economic district councils, the childcare desert map, when you can visit this address, this is where you'll find it. You can put in your address as previously stated. And then from there, we have the instructions also located on our OCFS website for the CCCP grant. And we have the instructions in English and Spanish. Next slide, please.
To help you prepare your application, we created a couple of slides with helpful tips to make sure that your application is the best it can be. The first thing that we're asking all organizations to do is to clear the New York State Grants Management System in SFS. Now, for those of you that have been in the Grants Gateway previously, you know that January 2024 is a very big month for grants management in the state of New York. The Gateway system has undergone a conversion and is now in the statewide financial system. So with a transition between Grants Gateway to the grants management system in SFS has taken place, and we are all charting a new course in grants management through the SFS system. So bear with us when we repeatedly, and I will probably do this for the next 15 years, I will call the gateway, even though everyone else is now calling it the grants management in SFS. So bear with us, dinosaurs that are stuck in our old ways. Any entity that was fully registered or pre-qualified in the gateway as of January 8th, 2024, should have already received information from the good folks at Grants Management and SFS with directions on entering and utilizing the new system in the statewide financial system. Any potential applicant that has absolutely no history with the gateway system or one whose status expired prior to January 8th, and they will have to start the process from the beginning. The grants management system is hosting numerous vendor support videos and will have tutorials available for all to use to familiarize themselves with the new system. It's very important that you understand that a lot of this is ongoing and the training videos are still being prepared as we speak. When you're done with viewing this webinar, you can go back to our respective websites, and we will also post a link for you in the sections in the DASNY website and the Childcare at OCFS website, so that you can have links to where to find some of those videos and where to see the schedule for those tutorials. But here on this slide at the very bottom are probably the two most important things we can give you: the email for the help desk at sfs.ny.gov or their phone number, and you can talk to a live body if you prefer. But it is important to know that you will need to do this prior to May. We are doing everything we can to ensure that you are ready by telling you again and again and again, failure to register or pre-qualify as of the date of your application will render your application ineligible for scoring. So please go to the SFS grants management system, register if you're a for-profit entity, pre-qualify if you're a not-for-profit entity. Just so you know, the state agencies reserve 5 days to review any submitted pre-qualification application in grants management. Sometimes, though, depending on the agency, depending on the volume, it can take significantly longer for those reviews to happen. Therefore, we, for Child Care Capital Program, are suggesting that you, child care organizations, make certain your own organization meets the threshold you need to have for supplying an application by May 1st. If you do this by May 1st, if you're pre-qualified, you're registered by May 1st, you know you're going to be able to submit your application by May 22nd. We don't want someone to have to go into an agency and ask for pre-qualification on May 15th, on May 16th, on May 17th, and hope, fingers crossed, that they can get pre-qualified or registered in order to submit their application. It probably won't happen based on volume. So you set your target goal, get yourself cleared in the grant management system by May 1st, and you're all set. You can go ahead and work on your application and get it in by the end of things. Again, any technical questions regarding grants management in SFS and pre-qualification and registration should be directed to the wonderful folks at the Statewide Financial System Help Desk. As good as Chastity and I are at helping people, this is not our wheelhouse. So if you email Children and Family Services or DASNY with your technical questions on SFS, we're going to direct you back to the nice people at the help desk. So there you go, helpdesk at sfs.ny.gov for their email, or 855-233-8363 for their help desk phone number. Next slide, please. Okay, our tips slide for number 2 is please understand the Child Care Capital Program's goals and objectives. Again, we cannot stress this strong enough. Carefully review the request for applications and its appendixes, including the actual application, which is Appendix 1, the scoring matrix, which is Appendix 2, the same scoring matrix that the DASNY and OCFS team will use to review your applications, you get to read now. Also, the frequently asked questions. and a sample grant disbursement agreement. And additionally, by February 29th, we will have all of those lovely questions that you all have asked with answers. If you have any questions prior to January 31st, go ahead, go to the SurveyMonkey and ask them. Again, if you've already submitted questions and SurveyMonkey says, oh, you've already submitted a question, simply use a different device. It'll let you ask an additional 10. You have more questions after that, borrow a friend's phone and submit even more. Read the full list of the SurveyMonkey questions and answers when we post them on February 29th. Again, we'll post them to the Child Care Services Division of Child Care Services, Office of Children and Family Services .ny.gov website, as well as DASNY.org, What We Do Grants Administration website, and we'll also make sure it's up on the funding opportunity on the Grants Gateway system as well. We will post everything. All you need to do is read it. Next slide, please. Tip number 3, this checklist is a list for organizations to gather the information and documents they're going to need before they submit their application. Again, we don't want you panicking on the 21st of May. We want you to very happily and easily submit your full, qualified, wonderful application to us for us to review. We have plenty of time between now and the end date for the application window. So between now and then, make sure you do your tips. Have you contacted your regional child care licensing office or the Department of Health, Mental Health in New York City to discuss licensing, registration, permit requirements for your proposed project, whether it be an expansion or a brand new project? Do you have that site control documentation I talked about before? Can you find it? Do you need to dig it out of a file somewhere? Is it a box in the basement? Go find it, scan it in, make sure it's a PDF so available for your use. Read it. If you have a lease, does it require your landlord to approve any capital amendments you make to your facility? Ask your landlord. This letter needs to be submitted with your application. Does your lease term extend for at least 8 years from the date of your application, which would be May 2024 rather, sorry. If it doesn't, you're going to have to ask for an extension. If you're working with your landlord and your extension won't be finalized, again by May 1st, because we don't want panicked, get a letter from the landlord or the property management company telling us that you're working on it and when it'll be finalized. Sometimes, depending on the organization that's the landlord, it could be very simple and easy. It could be done in a day. Sometimes a whole bunch of lawyers have to review everything and it's not going to be done for 6 weeks. Don't panic. If you don't have your extension by May 1st, 2024, ask for a letter explaining where you are in the process from your landlord. If it says you'll be done by July 1st, it's not a problem. If you receive an award and you come to DASNY for processing, we'll get that verification, we'll get that finalized extension before we get to GDA. But this is what you need to do. If you don't have it, ask for it. If you don't have it by May 1st, get a letter saying that someone's working on it. Okay, if you're a for-profit entity, do you have your own organization's formal formation documentation to submit with your application? Remember, the not-for-profits, in order to pre-qualify in the grants management system, how to provide all that. It's all in their document vault. But for parity and equity between the two entities, we're asking all for-profit entities to submit that with their application. So again, go find it. Is it in a box in the basement? Is it in a file cabinet? Dig it up, scan it in, have it as a PDF ready to put on with your application. Did you get professional cost estimates for the various portions of your project? Do you have all of them? Do you only have the electrician and the plumber, but you forgot the folks actually doing the physical construction? Go get that estimate. Make sure you have it available for you. Does your project cost exceed your requested grant amount? Or does it contain costs that aren't eligible for CCCP funding? Go find the evidence that your project has the funds needed to complete those outside costs so that we have them. Again, go back, you can see there's all sorts of documentation that you can use. Bank statement, other grant commitments are just 2 of them, but go get that. If you're an existing child care program, do you have a copy of your current certificate of occupancy? Kind of important, right? and then gather that data to support your project impact and project need from sections 5 and 6 for the portions of the application. Next slide, please. Now, you have all your information. You're working on your application. Before you send your application, you want to go to this slide. This is tip 4, your checklist for just prior to submitting your application. May seem simple, may seem oversimplified, but it can never hurt to make sure you've ticked off every single box we have. Did you complete every section of the application? Did you sign it? Did you use any additional sheets for any portion of the application? We allow you to. If the box we provided in the application is too small, or your project's so great you have to go on for 7 pages about how wonderful it is and what it'll do, not a problem. And you need additional sheets. Make sure they're part of your application PDF. Make sure the top of each of one of those additional pages tells us what question those pages refer to. If you only have one, it may be pretty simple. Number the questions, put the answer. Some of you may have many additional sheets. Make sure that we can clearly see which additional sheet and the information on it goes to which question corresponding in the application, so we can appropriately review it for eligibility and scoring. You don't want to go to all this trouble and get all this information for us and have us not be able to clearly map out what goes where and maybe potentially not score you to your full value. Make it easy for us. Remember, we're going to have a lot of these to review, so you want yours to shine. Are your application attachments, your site control, your cost estimates, any additional funding or relevant attachments, are they ready to be attached to your application submission? Are they all PDFs? Or do you have them all and you scan them all in as one? Not a problem, whatever works for you. But make sure you have them all right there so you don't have to scramble and panic on the 21st of May. And then lastly, if you are submitting more than one attachment to your email with your application, please make sure each and every attachment document you submit as part of your application has your organization's name and an identifier. I gave you some examples. For the fictitious ABC daycare, you can see that there's a PDF for the application. There's one for the organization documentations, assuming it's a for-profit entity. There's one for the certificate of occupancy, assuming it's already licensed and operational. There's one for the lease. There's one for the landlord letter. There's one for the project cost estimates. Another one for other grant funding because they need more than the CCCP grant to finish the project, and their bank statement. That's just an example. Whatever you're attaching, however you want to do it, you want to make sure each and every attachment has your name and then what it is. Again, the folks at OCFS and DASNY, we anticipate reviewing quite a number of these applications, and we want to make sure yours has the best chance of being clear and easy to review the materials and score them to the best we can. Next slide, please. Now we come to submitting the application. Ta-da! The critical moment. You are to send your application only to the following address: cccp@dasny.org. Very simple, short, and easy. Any application received any other way, whether you send it to a different email address at DASNY, somewhere at OCFS, or somewhere on the moon, submitted via mail, doesn't matter what the other delivery method, we won't deem it as received, and it will not be scored, not even for eligibility. All applications must be sent to cccp@dasny.org. We want you to make sure you enter the legally incorporated name of the organization and CCCP application in the subject line. Again, make this easy for us. The easier it is for us, the better your application is going to look. So in the subject line, and I did a quick little example at the bottom of the slide, there's the subject: Main Street Childcare CCCP application, right? It's all good. And then there are the attachments, attaching all your relevant files for your application. Again, you can have one comprehensive PDF or a series of PDFs, depending on the size of your application. If your application and your deed is only 2 pages, no big deal. You got a couple other things. Your total application is only 20 pages, not a big deal. We know some of you have leases that are hundreds of pages long just for your lease. So if that's you, you probably want the lease as its own attachment. Otherwise, your pile will be huge and may get stuck somewhere. Just make sure that you follow this methodology so we can see it. And I assure you, over here at the DASNY side, once the application window ends, we will constantly be on the lookout in our junk and spam folders here at DASNY for anything that our server might have inadvertently sent there due to size. It's very rare. We get huge emails all the time. Your email might balk at something over 300 pages. But DASNY, we get them all the time. But just be sure that we'll be looking there as well when it is time to get all the applications. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we're going to go into the OCFS guidance here for any proposed new childcare programs. There are steps that you need to take to become a licensed or registered program, including the childcare orientation. You can find this at OCFS Division of Childcare website. When you're looking for a new childcare program, you can also, I try to embed the links within these actual slides. So if you hover over the underlined blue childcare orientation, it should come up with the link. But I will include those as well, just to make sure that everybody has what they need. This orientation will outline New York State requirements for opening a childcare program, spaces where childcare can be provided, the ratios of children to adults, and resources for providers. Orientation includes important rules and regulations you need to know to run your business. And of course, to get more information about operating a daycare center in New York City, please contact the New York City Department of Health, Bureau of Daycare phone at the number or links listed here. The network of regional offices can provide you with application material, information about the process, and understanding legal requirements. So they can answer any questions you may have when it comes to seeking assistance on becoming a licensed daycare and or increasing your capacity, adding on any classrooms, things like that. In addition to the regional offices, we have the child care resource and referral agencies. They can help provide information to new and prospective childcare providers about any aspects of program startup, eligibility for funding, and assist you with starting and expanding your actual childcare program. Next slide, please. Okay, so for regional offices, it's important for proposed and existing providers to be in communication with your local regional office before you apply to this grant opportunity. If an applicant is opening a new childcare program, they must contact the regional childcare licensing office to discuss your licensing, your registration, your permitted requirements so that the plans reflect those requirements. For programs that have existing OCFS or New York State DOH-MH license, registration, or permits, regulator sign-off is required to be uploaded with your application. Please note there's no form for the sign-off. Rather, regional office staff can provide verification in writing via an email or a letter to the provider, and then the applicant must submit this documentation with their application. Next slide, please.
Okay. We've got our applications. We've scored for eligibility. We've scored for the scoring criteria. And your project is now advanced to DASNY for processing for a CCCP grant. The folks at DASNY will review your project and undertake the reviews we have to do for all grants we administer, not just CCCP. The accompanying slides or the next few slides go over the different review process. For brevity's sake, we felt it wasn't critical to go word for word because you have an application to produce. But just so you know, Throughout this process to get you to grant disbursement agreement, the DASNY team will be working through the variety of reviews. Obviously, we're going to constantly check for pre-qualification if you're a not-for-profit, because that is required all the way through to payment. We're going to do a financial review, and it should be relatively easy because you've provided most of the qualifying information we need for a financial review with your application. There are those cost estimates, invoices, other funding sources that you said you needed. We're going to verify all that again, but you've already provided us the information, so we shouldn't have to wait around for anything. So it should be a pretty quick process. We're also going to do our required review to make sure that you've complied with seeker. And depending on your project, it's not an issue. In the RFA, we do outline if you are or intend to be located in a historic building or a historic district, where to go through the State Office of Historic Preservation to see if you need to file for a SHPO letter, and we'll verify that and go over that with you when you get to us if that is needed. We'll also double check site control. Again, should be a pretty easy review because you've offered your deed or your lease and accompanying documents already. And there's a few more happy documentations and certifications that DASNY will have you fill out. And our bond and tax counsel review to make sure all the costs you've identified are in fact eligible for bond financing. This we hope to complete thoroughly within 1 year, if not sooner. We anticipate some of you, once awarded, will fly through our system again because you've done most of the legwork already. We do have in the RFA the very strict timeline of 12 months. So if we announce awards in July, you have until July of 2025 to meet these requirements. And we know you can do it, and we know we can do it with you. And trying to make sure what else. The reviews are spelled out a little bit further in the next accompanying slides, but we're not going to go over them individually. But we do stand ready to work with all the CCCP awardees to get you through the process as quickly and efficiently as possible so you can go forward and construct your project and get those daycare slots out to the people of the state of New York. So we'll go very quickly through the next slides, please. Just so you can see that they're there and you can review them at your leisure because you have the ability to hit the pause button. The next slide just again overviews our financial review, and looks like I have 2 slides on financial review and then for funding sources and cost estimates. And then we talk about other funding sources that you can have to help fund your program. And then again, we highlight the state environmental quality review that we have to do. It's something that DASNY does on every single project, whether you're a municipality, for-profit, not-for-profit entity, regardless of what funding stream we have for your grant project. We must make sure that everybody is adhering to the Environmental Quality Review Act. And again, if it's something special is needed for your project, we'll help you achieve that goal as well. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of our Childcare Capital timeline from beginning to end. Obviously, December 20th, we open the window, and the application window closes on May 22nd. And then we have the time ranges you see on the slide are for when we anticipate doing the various steps. Obviously, the first thing is scoring, eligibility, and then scoring. We anticipate announcing awards no earlier than July 15th. And then that's when the fun starts from July 16th through July 25th. Actually, I'm sorry, there's a typo in there. My apologies. It should say July 16th, 2023 to July 25th, 2025. Oh, Lord. And we will be working with you to notify you your qualifying applicant, getting all your documents into DASNY, doing all of your financial reviews, your seeker reviews, your site control, your vendor setup as need be in the SFS system to make sure we can pay you. And then our application review process, again, this could take 4 to 6 weeks if you're ready to rock and roll and everything turns around fast. or maybe you take 4 to 6 months. We'll go at your table. That's why you see under DASNY application review completion a date range of August 1st, 2024 to July 1st, 2025. We're at your pace. It's not a set. Every step is done and a certain date by every single grant recipient. So at your pace, but at any time, we estimate from August 1st on forward, we will be finishing reviews and submitting GDA, grant disbursement agreements, to applicants and getting those folks turned around and executed by DASNY. Again, one of the appendices to the RFA posted in all 3 locations is a sample grant disbursement agreement. So if somebody says, well, what happens if we get an award? When do we get money? All of those questions are answered in the FAQs, and they're also, you can review the sample grant disbursement agreement, which includes all of the steps you would need to do once you have an executed GDA to get funding for your project. It's all lined out there. Again, we anticipate every single CCCP project to be fully completed and all funds dispersed to the organizations by December 31st, 2027. That's our deadline. That's the program deadline. The entirety, not just for any one grant, but for every single one of them. We don't anticipate any extensions for any reason. So for you folks undertaking your projects once you're awarded, you need to remember that you need to be paid by December 31st, 2027. So you need to submit your requisitions with enough lead time for them to be reviewed and processed by accounts payable and paid by the state controller. So we have a target deadline of November 15th, 2027 for payment requisitions into DASNY so that they could be paid by the end of the year. But again, there's no reason to wait. Once you start doing your project, you can submit them anytime, and that's outlined again in the other documentation. You don't, if you have a $500,000 grant to do your project and you start incurring costs in June of 2024, you don't have to wait till you finish. As soon as you get an executed GDA, you can start submitting to get those costs paid. 1, 2, 3. You can do it one shot if you want, if that's the way you want to roll it, but you can piecemeal it as well, as an entirely your prerogative. And we certainly will go over all of that with all of you once you are awarded a CCCP grant. That's one of the first things. That's why we say initial notification, and we anticipate having a great deal of hands-on interaction with you folks as CCP grantees, conference calls, video chats, whatever you need from us, we are prepared to do it. So that's a snapshot of our timeline from now till the end of December 2027. Next slide, please. And again, the Childcare Capital Program SurveyMonkey is still open through 5 p.m. on January 31st. Watch the videos or watch our webinar, review the RFA, review the appendices, and if you still have questions, by all means, go ahead and ask them. Chastity, anything else?
No, you covered it. I just want to say thank you for listening to today's webinar. Good luck to everyone and have a great day.
Thank you all. Good luck.